I see the live button in my corner, and I'm delighted to be here this morning for the Ovadia Heart Health team with Dr. Hassina Kajee. And we're going to get right into it. We are at a little earlier time than our usual time, but we want to accommodate those living in South Africa on a different time zone, and we're very excited. Before we get started, we do have to let everyone know this is not intended for personal medical advice. If you're seeking personal medical advice from the Ovadia Heart Health team, please reach out to us at team@ifixhearts.com. This program, as all of our live streams, is intended for education, empowerment, and enlightenment. So, welcome, Dr. Kajee.
Thank you so much for having me, Krisna. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And hello to all your listeners, and thank you all for tuning in.
Welcome. So, we're going to jump right to it. There will be many listeners who know you. I've been honored to be a student of yours in the Nutrition Network Coach Practitioner Program, and there will be many others listening who have done the same. But can you, for our listeners who are not familiar with all your great work, just give us a little bit of background about your medical background, but also how you became involved with the Nutrition Network?
Thanks, Krisna. And it's a pleasure to be across the screen from you here after so many years. So I, like all doctors that I know, wanted to study medicine to help people. And I made the decision to specialize in internal medicine, which is a long and arduous field. And eventually, when I got to, my dream was to work in this particular tertiary hospital. And I got headhunted for a position. I was brand new once I'd specialized, and that was running the high care unit. And it was like a dream team that I was being invited into, and I was just ecstatic. At the time, I'd given birth to my daughter, so she was just 18 months old, and my husband and I took turns staying home because that was really important, or is really important to us, that that strong family kind of foundation. And so I barged into this career really excited. And I'm going on a little bit about the level of excitement because it felt really naive, seeing that it was already so far in my career. I had already experienced chronic diseases and the increasing, the just burgeoning rates of obesity. But it was, as you climb that ladder, your focus is different. But now suddenly I could settle into this dream job, and I loved it. But I was bombarded day after day after day after day, night after night, being on call with patients that had consequences of chronic disease, of obesity. So it was diabetes-related consequences, mostly heart disease, strokes, all of the atherosclerotic problems, but then also there were the cancers and, all of the metabolic dysfunction. So not just the morbidity of it, but the actual mortality. One of my jobs was to do the M&Ms, which is the morbidity mortality rates for our department, which was a referral center. And month after month, I was just shocked at the numbers. And then I started to get inquisitive about what was actually the difference in death rate between the non-communicable diseases like, the metabolics. And because in South Africa, we have TB and HIV. And so I wanted to see, are younger people dying, what was it from? And it was all chronic diseases. And month after month, the vast majority were under the age of 65. So when we took all of the people dying, more people under the age of 65 were dying from chronic diseases. It was then that I heard, I had already known about the work that Prof. Tim Noakes was doing. And, I was already read all the papers and it made sense to me, tried it for myself. And then I had my second child. And when I was on maternity leave with my second child, I was in this period of trying to fix, I suppose, I don't know, it was still kind of nesting. And I was introduced to Jane Bullen, who was the new CEO of the Noakes Foundation. And I'd approached Prof. Noakes and said, people see this diet as a rich man's diet, but here I am working in public health and the need is greatest here. What can be done about it? And that's where we started. We had our first groundbreaking intervention that we did with the Noakes Foundation, which was Eat Better. So we founded Eat Better South Africa and continued to do outreach and it was such a success that I took it over to my department, started to do it with my patients, nurses, and eventually the Noakes Foundation led to Nutrition Network as a funding scheme for the work that we were doing in the communities. And, here we are today.
What a fabulous story. And this is so representative of my impression of you. Is this family holistic dream inspiration that then turned into your work and where you are. And so many things to sort of unpack there. I want to dive a little bit into this holistic approach so that you sort of alluded to here. Many of us coaches, practitioners who are really familiar with your work understand that you talk a lot about this holistic approach, but maybe some of our listeners, I've even had people ask me, well, what does that really mean, holistic approach? And you've mentioned a few of the words, metabolic health. Describe and enlighten our listeners a little bit of what that actually means to you.
So a little bit that I left out from my story, which is so long that I don't want to bore anybody, but a huge part of it was that as a doctor, you're trying to live this your purpose, your ikigai. It's my purpose. The reason I got into medicine, and when I got to the point of holding in the one hand the solution that I saw, which is at that time was just nutrition. And the root cause of why my patients were so sick. And on the other hand, was this medical system that had failed, was broken. And even though I didn't implemented it, it is an astoundingly busy department. I've worked in other departments, in Ireland, for example, and it's busy around the world. Emergency departments are busy. Busy is an understatement. And so, it was this feeling of what are we doing? Goodness, there's all of this intelligence and thought and study and time going into academics, but we're failing. Like, why are we doing this if we're not doing it properly? And so I started to implement it, but it was way too early for the hospital that I worked in. It wasn't accepted, but I still had permission from my head of department and it was very successful. But I was burning out because I was a mom of 2 young kids. I was still breastfeeding through the night, doing calls, which is all part of the course. I knew that was going to be temporary and I loved it and it was wholeheartedly, it was part of my truth and what I wanted. And then when it came to work, it was just this constant flow. It felt to me at one point like I was standing at the edge of a cliff with these 2 arms out, and there was a horde of people rushing to the cliff. And I was, the starfish theory, the picking up the one starfish when it was like, I'm only able to catch these 2. What about the hundreds that keep falling? And it was a very cathartic, very emotional time for me. where I actually experienced burnout. I had to make the difficult decision to resign because I realized that my heart was no longer in that type of medicine, and I needed to find a new passion, a new way to practice what I knew. I needed to do what I knew was right, but that wasn't the place. Extremely difficult for somebody who loves their work, for whom it was a dream come true. And it was in that time where I discovered, I was introduced to integrative medicine. And that's where the holistic, so I'm sorry for the long-winded answer, but really it was delving and realizing there's another type of medicine. It's not just functional medicine, as in looking at the cellular level, what's going on. This is integrative. Who is this person in front of me? And funny enough, on my journey to what was my dream, there was one mentor that stood out, and his name is Dr. Aziz Abu. And he was the one, when I was a registrar, he would say, "What's wrong with the lady in front of you?" And I would say, da, 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 da. And he would say, "No, look at her face. Look at her and tell me what you see." And I would realize that I had not looked at my patient. I was looking at her hands for signs. I was looking in her mouth. I was looking and feeling around her heart and auscultating and all of the other very difficult things, but I hadn't looked at her. And when I looked at her, he said, "Do you see those lines on her face? Those lines could either be from smoking or from sun exposure. Look at her hands. Do you see the nicotine staining? That tells me, do you see, she probably works outdoors. You see how hard her hands are. She's a laborer." And it sparked something. So when I discovered integrative medicine, it was like putting all the puzzle pieces together and realizing that we're getting it wrong in medicine. Holistic means looking at the person in front of you holistically. Who is this person? Not really who is this woman or man. Who is this person and how do they fit into their environment? Where do they see themselves? What does society see them as? What is their mindset? What is their view around healing? Are they even aware of stress, in their lives? How much sleep do they get? How much sun exposure do they get? Are they happy? What's their relationship like? What is their relationship with their parents like? Do they have a community involvement? Do they have a spiritual practice? It's all of these things. That's holistic. And when we come to the root cause of ailments, all of these factors plug into why people get sick.
Oh, beautiful analogy. And this completely embraces also what we're trying to help in, educate and empower for our employers, right? Because often in company settings, it's been a lot of very stringent focus. We like to call, in the past, maybe employee wellness programs were disease management focus, only looking at those specific numbers and markers. And maybe you only could participate in the program if you had something wrong with you. If we back up and try to think holistically, are you sleeping well? Do you have a community? Are you happy? These things matter. And a particular piece, which you've talked about a lot, is, are you burned out? And on just that topic, because it is such a hot topic with our employers, what would be some signs or things that you, as this brilliant medical doctor, would say, you need to be looking for this, or you need to be educating on this in that realm of burnout?
So the funny thing with burnout is that it's such an overused term at the moment. And I think that ever since COVID, and then the next peak, and the next peak, and the next peak, There was so much that people faced: loss, personal loss, just the global sort of hopelessness when people, specifically medical, the healthcare environment, because normally you have a pneumonia. I know how to treat a pneumonia. You get better from pneumonia. You're rarely going to die from that pneumonia. Now, I don't know what to do. I've done everything. And, that feeling of hopelessness when even the healthcare practitioners don't know what to do and are dying, leaves the world in a very sort of frightened place. Along with the financial issues and everything that we saw and experienced. And I think a lot came to head. Um, so when it comes to burnout, the funny thing is most people don't recognize that they're burnt out. It's their families or their colleagues that go, hey, something's not right. But because everybody is probably experiencing some sort of, I don't want to use this term loosely, PTSD. There is some anxiety that hasn't been dealt with, because let's face it, we're not good at feeling our feelings at all. And so we just keep going. So a lot of people have, sort of done this thing where our heads are in the phone, and we're not connecting with each other. We've got our earbuds in, and we just, don't talk to me. And so we don't look at each other anymore. We don't look in the eyes. But if you were to look in the eyes, you would see whether the light is still on or whether the light is dimming or has gone off, right? The next thing would be just irritability. The person is easily irritable, not fun to be around. People have a lack of reduced motivation to do the things, that obviously the things we enjoy doing, there's great motivation to do that, but the things we sort of have to do. So, I truly believe in that your work should be your ikigai, your purpose, the reason that you're alive. And a lot of people are still getting there in the workplace. They're not really doing that thing they absolutely love, but they're on the stepping stone and they're hoping, I'm doing this and I've got a side hustle, or I'm doing this in order to do that so that I can get there. So they're on a track. And so the work that they're doing may not necessarily be like stimulating and amazing. And so it becomes even more difficult to do a job like that. And then just not really looking after yourself. So I have lots of plants in my home, and I use my plants as a gauge for my mental health. So when my plants are looking green and the leaves don't have dust on them and, they're not drooping, and then I know, hey, I'm doing great, because I love my plants. And so it's that last level of, I'm not going to let them, the whole thing about my kids have food and, all these things. And now I can get to my plants. So if I'm getting to my plants, it means I've already got to everything else. So it's things like that. When you lose that kind of joy, you don't want to hang with your friends anymore. You prefer, no, I'm not going to, complaining a lot, just being generally negative. It's a very slippery slope. From there, the person can slip into, there's maybe underlying anxiety, just the inability to handle and cope with issues like just sudden new deadlines or something like that, and then becomes depressed, as in clinically depressed, diagnosed by a doctor. And people may be in that state for a long time. And then you start to lose sleep, insomnia, maybe you're going to bed later, maybe you're not able to sleep for more than a couple of hours at a time. And then it's pretty devastating if it's not picked up early.
And these are all incredible points for individuals, but also specifically employers and, managers. Or again, this goes back to your reflection about your mentor. Really look at the person. Not just, are they not completing their tasks like they used to, or not having the energy. But what else is going on there? What else can you visibly see and hear
Mhm.
from them? I want to take just a moment here to make sure that our listeners, if you would like to follow Dr. Kajee, she can be reached at the Nutrition Network, and all the great work, the courses that you're doing there. And how long has the Nutrition Network been going now? Since
It's going on 8 years now.
fantastic, right? Wonderful. And on our topic, since we're talking about burnout and resiliency here at Ovidia Heart Health, we have a recent white paper on resilience that can be downloaded along with our other white papers. So take advantage of that. It's free. We have lots of free resources up there. Um, so you bring up again, I'm going to keep going back to this purpose. One of the things we talk about in our programs is trying to first say, well, why do you want to be healthy? Right? That purpose in life, because that is an important piece of this broader approach to health. Yes, we want to improve our metabolic markers. Yes, we want to reduce our chronic disease, but why do we want to be healthy? Do you talk about that with your patients?
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing to actually talk about is the why. Now, I have to start by saying that we're very bad as a global community at recognizing when we need help. So, by the time I am very lucky to be in a position where I have met people without disease who are interested in preventing issues come to me. For example, I've got a patient who has a family history of familial hypercholesterolemia, very fit, very healthy, has read all the papers, and just wanted to come to me to enhance, to see if he's doing all the right things and what I can suggest in terms of tweaking exercise, supplements, lifestyle, all those things. I have patients who have lost a lot of weight and then they reach menopause and they just started to gain a little belly, very little weight, maybe 2 kilos. You know, I don't know what that is in pounds, like maybe about 5 pounds or something, 6 pounds. And they're horrified because they're doing everything right and it feels horrible to them. I've got parents who preemptively, you know, the pediatrician checked the children's HbA1c, which was just routine, and found it to be slightly elevated. And otherwise, you know, that's obviously getting into disease territory. But very few people care about weight gain. That's one of the signs that, you know, I mean, one of the easiest signs that we know, you and I, Krisna, know is disease, is when you start gaining weight, you know, unless, of course, it is when you're pregnant. We're not talking about weight as a number, we're talking about body fat, specifically belly fat, visceral fat. Very few people care that they're fatigued, that they are just demotivated, that, you know, that they're short of breath walking up the stairs. So when I see patients, usually it's because they have a disease. And now the disease is the motivating factor. But really, if it's somebody coming in who wants to lose weight and doesn't have any kind of, you know, diagnosis, the most important thing is, what is your why? What is your why? Because if you don't know I can't tell you why to do it. You have to know why this is important to you, because you're going to spend an hour, 2 hours with me and then see me a couple of times, but you're going to live in your life and live in your body. You need to know why it's important to you. So for many people, it's going to be, I want to be there for my children. I don't like that I get home and my child says, "Oh, it's okay, Dad. I know you won't play with me. You're too tired." You know, I can't run around. I can't lift my child up because my back gets thrown out because my belly's so big, and I'm losing out. So the why is the most important part because it's the thing that keeps you on track.
Beautiful. And um, this is very important. What you say is we're not very good at asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
And not to sort of be gender specific, but do you see this more prevalent amongst your female patients or male, or is it pretty standard across both sexes?
It's so standard. In fact, it feels like women are more involved in wanting to improve, which is great because generally, still, it's in most households, unlike my household, my husband's busy with supper at the moment, but in most households, it's the woman who's cooking supper. Um, and so that's great because if they know why they need to make the changes, then the whole family ultimately, potentially benefit. But really, I think that what worries me is as a society, we have just accepted weight gain. We've accepted it for our children. It's when you see, and I'm not talking about body shaming. I don't look at that at all. I just look in terms of disease. My eyes look and see a child that has really skinny arms and legs, even if they're not overweight at all. I see a child and I wonder, how much protein are you eating? Do you know that your body needs protein to build your bones, your muscles, your heart, your immune system? And, just in general, I'm talking about in general. And then I see children, I mean, there are morbidly obese children who can hardly walk. They have arthritis. And we have accepted that a bit of chub becomes a little bit more, and then we've even accepted it. I mean, if we've accepted it for children, then what else? It's the last rung. But for us as humans, we've forgotten that if you look at pictures of your great grandparents, if you just look at, a picture of them with their family, there were very few people who were overweight. Now, I'm using the weight as a proxy for insulin resistance. I'm using the weight because it is one of the first markers of insulin resistance. Not to say that people who are of normal weight would not have insulin resistance, because there is a rising number of people that are thin but are still metabolically unwell. They have inflammation. They're prone now at risk of cancer, heart disease, everything that the people who are overweight are at risk of. And I just feel like as a society, we know that our metabolic rate starts to, decrease in your 20s. But even before that, we have this epidemic of obesity. So we're approaching, it's like weight is no longer a health. It's not a health. It's a aesthetic issue. It's not a health issue. So that's the thing that I think. And then of course is the fatigue and just the the lack of vitality that people have just accepted as the norm.
Uh, and I would just highlight in respect to, I've been traveling a lot this last year for Dr. Ovadia for our employee wellness programs across the country. And every time I get on the airplane, I'm a bit astounded that actually the people needing assistance are becoming a larger group than the people who can walk independently down the gangplank to the airplane. And each time it seems like that group that needs assistance gets larger. And this is irrespective of age. I see young people, I see middle-aged, I certainly see those in my age group. I'm not shy about being in the above 60 group here. But this acceptance that you're going to be overweight. And again, weight is not the only metric we're talking about. We're talking about visceral fat and the implications of insulin resistance, or that you'll be, slightly impaired mobily, that you're
Mhm.
difficulty walking, difficulty with joints, fatigue. And it's like we need a new era of, let's not accept that illness should be just the natural thing. Let's accept that well-being could be an option.
Absolutely. It's the standard. What is my standard for myself? And I feel like that is something, even in our group of people that come that want to, improve their metabolic health. For me personally, I stress that this is not just for you. Please make sure that this translates to your family, because your children, of course, they will watch you exercising. And if you incorporate them, you do something with them, it becomes a part of their lives. But there's obviously going to be that kind of learning, um, but it's really, really important that people understand that it's the functionality. Your functionality is lost when those standards are dropped. So for whatever reason, I've spent so much time thinking about this and thinking about sort of the post-war era that my granny grew up in, and what the thought process must have been for that generation. And then my father's, my parents' generation, what was the driving need then and now? With me, there's a lot more emphasis on um, positive parenting and gentle parenting, and understanding the child in front of you, and what effect does that have on the generation that's, there are a lot of people who've gone the other way and done the permissive parenting, um, where we have had, a lot of authoritarian parenting previously, and we want to be more in the authoritative space. And so I think that a lot of what people have been exposed to, both parents working and not being able, no mom in the house. And so there's, because they have to, both parents have to work to afford to live. And then people eating takeouts or box meals, and it's just what they're used to. And so it's so important to have these conversations, because I think that people believe that it's just too hard. It's just too hard. And we know, you and I, that it's a simple solution of removing rather than adding more. It's really just removing things, and you really don't miss anything. And then you suddenly realize, oh, I felt awful. I didn't realize how awful I felt until I removed, you know, I didn't realize how negative I was. And that is the benefit of eating whole foods that are low in, all of the nasties and preservatives, not the ultra processed foods, is that it allows your body to heal, and you can start to regulate your dopamine levels better. You can start to recognize that I keep going to the pantry when I'm feeling low. What's that about? And then replace it with another behavior that gives you a dopamine boost, like cuddling with your pet, or cuddling with your partner or child, or going for a walk, going to the gym, watching the sunset or the sunrise. So it's really sad, but it's also, I have immense hope in the power, that ripple effect of someone ringing the bell and someone just being, I'm strong. I mean, you're over 60, you look fantastic. And what a beautiful image that is for people that you work with, to go, oh, wow, I want to be like Krisna. I don't want to be in a wheelchair, and I really want to be like happy and strong and have that vitality.
Oh, thank you very much. And we as a company at the Radio Heart Health, we try to help inspire by just simply walking the walk. And you can reach us about our programs. It's right up here on the screen. And again, I want to put up where you can reach Dr. Kajee at Nutrition Network. And maybe this is the perfect segue. Again, one of my questions was, how do we help make this less complicated? Because we know it can be overwhelming. We hear frequently there's so much information about health and well-being. I don't even know where to start. But I know the Nutrition Network is really using the terms therapeutic carbohydrate restriction. How do we help companies, employers understand the benefits of therapeutic carbohydrate restriction without making it incredibly complicated?
Thank you for that question. I think that the biggest issue I've mentioned, of course, is that people don't understand what ill health is. I actually did a talk that we're doing, a module that we're about to release with Keto Mojo for the early signs of insulin resistance. Things like acne, gingivitis, tooth crowding, dental caries, hair thinning. All of those are actually early signs of pre-diabetes. Now, diabetes has been around for a long time. So when you say the word diabetes to somebody, they get a fright. Hypertension has been around for a long time. So when you say that, people get a fright. But what we want to do, and what we're doing at Nutrition Network, is trying to educate doctors, healthcare workers across the board, and coaches. And our coaches are people who are sometimes lay people who had a problem with their own health, discovered that it had to do with a nutrition problem, changed their life around, felt so fantastic, wanted to spread the word, spread it with their family and their friends, and realized, oh, I'm coaching. Now I really need to know how to coach. And then came to us and said, I need to learn more because I want to make a career out of this. And that is one of the biggest groups that we have of people that are coming to us, and they've found their ikigai. This is their purpose and passion in life. And so the big problem is that that translation of therapeutic carbohydrate restriction sounds so, ooh, I'm on some medical thing. And it's so, that particular term is so that healthcare providers understand what we're talking about. But really, the problem is that people think of ketogenic and low carb and whatever other names, even paleo, as a diet. And the reason people are interested in the diet is what I mentioned before, because people are interested in weight loss. And there's nothing wrong with being interested in weight loss. The body is giving a really strong sign that something's not right, and you're doing a good job trying to figure out how to get back to a baseline weight. But the problem is when people don't understand why they've gained weight. People still follow the old story of calories in versus calories out and low fat. And, it's very restrictive. So at Nutrition Network, we teach nutrition. We teach you about what your body needs at every stage in life. What do you need, for example, as you're approaching, when you're in perimenopause and menopause? What do you need as an adolescent to support your hormones and, all of those things? And when you notice illness, why has that happened? What is the root cause? Which is why holistic health is a huge part of the way we practice. Because when we look at the root cause, we're then able to go, oh, it's not just about cutting out bread and rice and potatoes and just having just going carnivore. It's not about that. It's about the person who is going to be cooking that meal and all of the other things. So really, I think that people need to understand, firstly, am I as vibrant as I was when I was playing college football? Am I that person? When I lift up my shirt and I look in the mirror, do I like what I see? What would my coach have said? You know, if we're talking about somebody who did some sort of sport at school, and you go, but why is it that with humans only, we get fatter as we age and we think that's okay? But we don't see that in the animal kingdom. We don't see that with lions. In fact, when a lion is just about to take its last breath, it is frail. We don't see that with giraffes. We only see that with domesticated animals and humans. And the reason is nutrition. The reason is more than just nutrition. It's because we've broken our circadian rhythm, meaning we don't live, our modern living has disrupted all of the healing purposes. Sleep is one particular fundamental healing modality that if you fix, you can run triathlons and eat the healthiest diet that is Prof. Tim Noakes approved, and be taking the best supplements, but if you don't get your sleep right, you're never going to be healthy. So it really is, are you interested in yourself enough? Do you think you're worth peak health? What's your standard for yourself as a human? And if you're a business owner, what is your standard for your business, for this legacy you want to leave, for the employees that come to work? What is the standard that you have, that, once you can answer that, I have the standard for myself. I see no limits. I see no reason why I can't do pull-ups. I should be able to do X number of push-ups, normal push-ups, not, assisted or anything like that. And I want to get there. Maybe I'm not there now, but I'll get there. How will I get there? I can get there when I remove Netflix in the evening and replace it with blah, when I remove fast foods and I replace it with a little bit of pre-planning, when I remove slouching over, whatever, doing whatever I do in my lunchtime and replace it with a walk. So it really is about, I feel, the individual's standard. Do I want to waste this one precious life that I'll never get back? Or because we lose muscle mass year after year after year, you're not going to gain that. And as you lose muscle mass, you're also losing the ability to regulate your blood glucose. And you're also losing the ability to regulate inflammatory, your risk then just goes through the roof of all of the chronic diseases, including cancer, dementia. So really it's about, you don't have to worry about the terminology. It's not a diet. It is a way of life.
And we use that philosophy frequently. It's a lifestyle, it's not a diet. And finding that way that allows you to perform at your best ability. I know in the business world, they'll use things like growth mindset. We tend to use the word performance mindset. What's going to really help you perform in life holistically? I think it's Dr. Gabrielle Lyon who uses the term, the muscle is the organ of longevity. I love that you reminded us about that. And certainly in my age group, it's something you have to, be consistent in taking care with. Good protein intake, good resistance training are sort of non-negotiables, really, I feel like. Well, as we get, this is just incredibly, I feel super honored to have been able to ask you a couple of questions here as your former student.
Thank you.
Again, I want to remind everyone where they can reach Dr. Kajee at the nutritionnetwork.org. Also, if you want to download our recent white paper on resiliency, we'll be exploring some of these very topics we've touched on here today. Our purpose in this program is obviously a bit employer-based because we are offering employer wellness programs. And what would be some small steps with your incredible background that you think, just one or two, that people could just start doing? Our last guest said something, you got to just jump in the water. How can we help individuals, whether it's on understanding therapeutic carbohydrate restriction or understanding the signs of burnout? What do you feel are just a couple of your top hot button points for getting started?
So, I mean, this is not an easy one, the first one, but it is in my opinion, the most important one, which is to look in the mirror, to look at yourself and to do the inner work yourself. So the first question is to be able to, understand that productivity comes from happy people. Happy people who are respected are productive. And those happy people are going to be happiest when they don't have inflammation. But really, you have to be approachable. You have to be able to see people as people. You have to be able to have done the inner work yourself in order to be able to take whatever's coming, because life happens, death and divorce and illness happens. And so if as an employer you're not growing, you are not taking responsibility for yourself and doing whatever my trigger points are, why do I get triggered, then that's my first thing, that it really starts with each one of us taking responsibility for ourselves. The next really easy thing to do is movement. So while I'm sitting here talking to you, you might notice I'm swaying a little bit. I have a standing desk and I have an under desk cycle. And I try to move as much as possible in the day. I wear an Oura ring, and I know a lot of people wear some kind of tracking device. And that's a really good way to keep track of how much am I moving, how sedentary am I, because there's research to show that sedentary behavior is associated with profound inflammation and atherosclerotic mechanisms starting off in the body that are different to the other mechanisms that we know of that are specifically linked to sedentary behavior. And so movement is easy. So if you don't have the ability to get everybody standing desks or walking pads or something like that, then perhaps you can get one of those little, inexpensive laptop stands that you place on your desk and stand up, take breaks between sitting and standing. Another thing I have in my office, which I'll just show you back there, is a rebounder. Yeah, so it's a mini rebounder. So you have to just make sure you're getting one that's good quality, that's not going to jar you. There's like a tapered spring, or it's the bungee cable one. And that is something to just do a little bit of rebounding, is an excellent way to just, even for 60 seconds every hour. You could also just do 10 squats. There was a paper that came up showing just 10 squats an hour was very beneficial. So movement in the workplace during the day, you're there for most of your day anyway. Try and I'm not saying that this has to be your exercise, but just, try to not to sit for too long. And then the other thing is, of course, food. We find that in the office environment, it can be very beneficial in the office environment when someone starts making the decision to eat healthy, and then you notice, wow, you look great. What have you been doing? And I've noticed that in my nurses when I worked at the hospital, the tea room became what's in your lunchbox? Oh, what did you bring? And they would share recipes, and they would share wins. But it can also be a negative space when people are losing weight too quickly and other people are jealous. I've had a nurse come to me saying, I've lost 10 kilos, and this nurse, they're laughing at me and they say my head is too big for my body. That's a cultural issue we face in our country, so people can be mean. So it has more positive impact, I think, than negative. Just, maybe doing something around food, changing the vending machines, get a vending machine in that gives healthy, water, sparkling water, nuts and jerky, and those types of things, bars that have good ingredients, rather than the usual ultra processed rubbish that we're used to having. Do something around food, because a healthy, insulin sensitive employee is going to be an employee that is alert, that is excited, that is not going to be fatigued, that makes great decisions. Pam from Low Carb USA, she said a few years ago when I was speaking there, she says, whenever they go to these conferences, the hotel staff, they say, who are you people? I've noticed that all of you people who come, you're so nice, you're so happy, and we host so many conferences, and the people are so like grumpy and annoyed all the time, but we always notice that the low carb people are so happy. And that's true, because it is that removal of that chemical bombardment in the system. The body is, I think what people don't understand is, when you eat ultra processed food, you're taking in, it's almost, and I don't joke when I say this, it's chemical warfare, because your gut is part of the, it's part of the external environment. You're now exposing it to damaging ingredients. There might be a little bit of good nutrition in there, but with all of the negative chemicals and substances that enter your system, the immune system goes on high alert, and your entire body then is in a stressed state. And when insulin levels rise, cortisol levels rise too. So you'll see that people who eat a high sugar diet, there's this, kind of like a lift, and a lot of that has to do with the adrenergic, the adrenaline and the cortisol that's been activated. Chronically high levels of cortisol are really detrimental. So when you remove this, as scary as it might seem, really, there's nothing scary about eating eggs for breakfast. So that brings me to my final tip, which is start the day right. Eat something that is a non-negotiable. I always eat eggs for breakfast, or your choice of a healthy, muesli, high protein, something like that with yogurt. Start the day right and fill up. Make sure that you're getting in enough protein, enough healthy fat, and it's more difficult to make bad choices once you've started the day right.
Oh, this is fantastic. So, just a quick recap on that. Start with the inner work, right? Start with yourself for our leaders in companies. Move as much as you can throughout the day. Find those ways to break up the sitting, standing desks, tips, any type of, maybe even some air squats in there. Fix the foods, right? If we're not addressing these incredible, as you say, sort of chemical warfare on our body, it's going to be very hard to be productive, right? And start the day right. And well, hopefully for our listeners, you started the day right by listening in to us. Once again, you can reach Dr. Kajee at thenutritionnetwork.org. If you want more information about our employee wellness programs at Ovadia Heart Health, at backs/wellness. And please download our white papers. We've got several of them and topics you've mentioned here on sedentary behavior, resiliency, addiction in the workplace. And we're talking food addiction, lots to explore. And I just want to say thank you so much for your incredible work. You've inspired hundreds of coaches, myself included, medical practitioners, and of course, we're very thankful for all the work that Nutrition Network does, but you specifically. Thank you, Dr. Kajee.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I'm so glad to see all the great work that you're doing and just taking the bull by the horns and addressing this, because this is such an important topic. It's our global economy that is really going to struggle if we don't get health back into the workplace. There's a lot of uh, days lost due to having to go pick up scripts or not feeling well. The impact of eating poorly is massive when it comes to the immune system. And so that ability to bounce back from illness, I think that it's so great that you're shining the light on this. And I really hope that people take note and really start to just honor the body for what it is and look after it and do the best with it for as long as you can.
Oh, thank you so much. Great words to finish on. And for our listeners, those who couldn't join or only were able to catch a glimpse, the recording will be up soon. And thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.